Faces and Chapters from the Central European Legal Heritage. Welcome to the Central European Legal Insight, the podcast series introducing the professors of the Central European Academy at the University of Miskolc through insightful conversations with Judit Varga.
What is the problem with a ever closer union now? We have actually a concept where the ever closer union is not concept for it is a concept of negotiation and political bargaining, and it is not a concept of people interests and make them stick together with their interests and with their values. But national identity is something that tackles the spirit and the soul of the country and the nation, and this is very important to be inside the constitutional identity, because otherwise we will stay only with the formal aspect of the state and without essence, without material side of the state. If this path is mine and only my own path, and this is what the Central European Academy cherish a lot. Other universities want to remodulate your opinion and to remodulate your personality. And thanks to the Central European Academy that have never put me on never put a censorship on my articles and chapters. Thanks to their openness, their open minds, I'm really honored that I have everything what I've written stay in the original shape.
So welcome to Central European Legal Insights, the podcast series of the Central European Academy at the University of Miskolc. My name is Judit Varga and I work as a senior mentor at the Academy. I will be your host in this podcast. In each episode, we present the faces and the personalities of the Central European Professors Network. Throughout friendly conversations, we would like to bring you closer to the rich diversity of Central Europe's legal heritage. Also, we would like to explore the ideas and stories beyond science that connect us in this region. With this introduction, I warmly welcome in the studio Professor Dr. Tanja Karakamisheva Jovanovska from Skopje. She is a full professor of the Faculty of Law at the University in Skopje, North Macedonia, and she's also a former member of the Venice Commission of her country. Tanja, if I may call you by the first name, we are long-standing friends and you are cooperating with the Central European Academy for quite some time. I'm so honored that you accepted our invitation.
Dear Judith, thank you very much for your kind invitation. I'm really pleased and honored that I am here with you and that we can talk about various issues and questions which arise not only from the legal perspective but also political perspective, and that the questions which are very important not only for the European member countries but also for the Western countries and Western Balkan countries. And thank you once again for your kind invitation. I'm really honored to be here with you.
Tanja, you have been participating in many of our programs already and projects. Some of your contributions are contained in this book. So this is why this more or less 70-minute discussion, friendly discussion with you, would cover challenging issues related to human rights in Central and Eastern Europe, the European integration, and we will also touch upon the buzzword of today's legal science, the constitutional identity. But again, I'm very honored to have you as our long-standing partner. And before we jump into the professional topics, I would like to introduce you as the face of North Macedonia and a very important partner for the Central European cooperation. Could you please just tell to our listeners how did you become a lawyer? Why did you choose law? What are you doing exactly today? Because I just mentioned your most important titles as a full professor at the Faculty of Law, but please, the floor is yours, and you are now North Macedonia in this podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, how I became a lawyer, it was since my first years of my childhood, I will say. I was amazed by the people who are advocating the human rights and the people who are working very hard on bringing the law on a high position in the system and bringing justice in the system. And I was amazed by people who were professional in that area, and that's why I choose to be a lawyer. But I never dreamt that I will become a professor one day. But since I am professor and in this stage of my life, I'm really honored that I'm professor of law and especially of constitutional law, because it is familiar to the lawyers that constitutional law is actually in the intersection between law, politics, governance, power, and everything is mixed. And this is a real challenge to catch everything what is going on, not only in your national state but also in European Union, in United Nations, international law, and so on. That's why actually the first idea, the first time impression when I was a kid was that I want to be something that can spread some profession that can spread justice and legal norms into wider systems. And thanks God that I have this chance, and I hope that I manage to become a good professor and good lawyer. It is very difficult to speak from your personal position. You know, what is your professional career? Best things which you have done in your career. But first of all, I would like to say that my career started in 2002 when I earned my PhD diploma at the Faculty of Law in Ljubljana in Slovenia. Yeah, and then from that starting point, I went through these official stages at the faculty. I become assistant and associate professor, and now I'm full-time professor. I'm working at the Faculty of Law, which is Justinianus Primus, which is integral part of universities and Cyril and Methodius. Mm-hmm. And it is the best and oldest state university in Macedonia. And also I am a head of the department, of the biggest department at the faculty, related with the legal and legal political sciences. And also, as you mentioned, I was one mandate deputy member, Macedonian member at the Venice Commission, and one mandate full member of the Venice Commission. I was co-authoring several opinions which were adopted by the plenary session at the Venice Commission. I would like also to mention that I'm part of the founding member of the ICON Western Balkan department. Mm-hmm. The ICON is International Society of Comparative Law situated in USA. Also, I'm a reviewer at the Springer Publishing House. I'm involved as a visiting professor and master of human rights and rule of law in Central European Academy. I'm also supervisor at the doctoral school at the University of Miskolc. I did not only theoretical work, I did many things related with drafting laws, drafting national strategies in my home, in my country. I was doing a lot of things related with the legal documents, conceptualization in legal document. So I'm also working as a national and international expert in many projects, really, starting from UNDP projects, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung projects, GIS projects, Council of Europe projects, UN projects, European
so
Union
you have the
projects.
full spectrum.
So thanks God, I was really involved in many things, but not only as a theoretician, but also as a legalist practitioner. So thanks to many colleagues and many friends which are helping me to be part of these projects, and thanks for the Central European Academy that gives me a space and enough room for my freedom of expression and also for freedom of intellectual development, because if you don't have friends in the academia, it is very tough to go and to develop yourself and your academic work without any friends.
And we also have to mention for the audience that you are beautiful mother of 3 children. So yes. Besides this impressive output throughout your scientific activity, you still managed to be a mother, which
yes.
is an
this
extra
is my great role Yes, because being a mother is something special. It has some special status in my life, and being a mother is first role, and then being all the other things.
Everything is just secondary.
Everything, yeah.
And in this scientific achievements, what you can be really proud of besides your motherhood, can you highlight some precedents or some works which you are the most proud of?
I'm most proud of works in Central European Academy, if you allow me to say this, because
give us a moment. This is the promotion time for the Central European Academy.
Yeah, this is really from the bottom of my heart. Sincere gratitude that I have really not only a place but also a freedom to think and freedom to talk and freedom to express my inner self. What I really think about the political, legal, historical issues, which are really problematic in many ways, not only in Western Balkan countries, but also in the European Union. And thanks to the Central European Academy that have never put me on the censors, never put the censorship on my articles and chapters. Thanks to their openness, their open minds, I'm really honored that I have everything what I've written stay in the original shape, and they never put pressure on me, make changes in this passus, in this paragraph, please be gentle.
Other places,
especially when you are publishing the works in Western European universities, they're always trying to put direct or indirect pressure on you as an author.
To take the line, or
not take a line, but always said you are so critical in this line. Please be more softer. You are so overwhelmed explaining this situation. Please be more diplomatic with diplomatic wording and so on. So every time when I'm doing my papers in the Western universities, I'm feeling this kind of pressure, especially because I'm coming from the Western Balkan and they are seeing us, our professors, as maybe second level professors, and maybe because they don't have any experience like them, but maybe because we are not coming from Oxford or Cambridge, although we have many experiences working with Oxford professors, but still they are seeing us in a very different lenses, and they're trying to actually to even remodulate your opinion, sometimes to brainwash your opinion. But in my case, they don't have any successes, thanks God, because I'm still, I'm always staying on my words, no matter how hard are they, and I'm always maybe they think that I am wrong, but even if they think that I am wrong, I will stay on that path. If this path is mine and only my own path, and this is what the Central European Academy cherish a lot. Other universities want to remodulate your opinion and to remodulate your personality.
But this is our mission statement to be stronger together and to stand up for our own beliefs.
And you success.
I do believe that Central Europe is a special place in Europe, and other parts of the continent should have much more knowledge about who we are, the special diversity of this region, because we are not just a block of ex-socialist countries. We are unique, each and every country, each and every nation. And here at the Central European Academy, everyone has the right to be patriotic and local patriotic. And this is what we cherish. And this is why we share our traditions and know-how, and we realize our commonalities. So this is how we started this cooperation. And coming to our special topics of this discussion, let's touch upon human rights in Central and Eastern Europe. And you are now an editor of our forthcoming book on human rights from a Central and Eastern European perspective. This was also among the very objectives of the establishment of this Central European Professors Network, that we might have our special traditions reasons why we interpret the classical human rights in a Central European way. And this would be my first question. What are the specificities of human rights protection in this region? Do you feel there are some specificities, and where are the typical topics and areas of protection of human rights which are somehow special for us? This is a very big topic. Now we can talk for
like ocean.
Ocean, yes.
But still, I will give you maybe 2 or 3 points regarding this question. I think that in Western Europe and Eastern Europe, and especially the Central and Eastern and Southeastern Europe, we have many differences and many specificities which make changes, make a lot of changes in our system inside. So the Western European countries have their tradition, which is more libertarian, more individualistic, with individualistic approach. And speaking about human rights and freedoms, they are really, they have many ideas that are provoked by the liberal and democratic standards and way of living. But we are from the other side of the ocean, I will say. We are the one who have more courage and the one who have more live in more specific circumstances than Western Europe countries. We are the one who in 20th century, the most years of the 20th century were a part of the socialist rule, and this part of this Soviet Union influences, and we are the countries who felt the authoritarian and totalitarian system, which was a product of Soviet influence and which was a product of socialist rule. And we were living in these circumstances of more than 35, 40 years. On the other side, Western European countries have also their own specificities, their own revolution, their own fighting for human rights. But these revolutions were much in a history, in a period when they have, for example, French Revolution, when they have revolution with glorious revolution from Englishmen, from starting from Magna Carta Libertatum, I don't know, Bill of Rights, conventions and treaties which come in that period of time. But since we are living in 20th and 21st century, because I'm the generation which was also living in 20th century and now in 21st, I can say that we are fighters. We are real fighters, and we explore what is the real meaning of living in democratic system and democratic conditions. Other nations are also democratic, speaking about Western countries, but they have maybe forgotten how is to live in authoritarian and totalitarian system. We still have these memories, fresh memories. They are still in our blood. They are still in our DNA.
In our mentality.
So we're still under the influence of this authoritarian pressure, and how is to be without human rights, how is to live without any good level of economic standards, social standards, and so on. So we are more with the courage, and we are more with the strength to be a winner at the end of the day, because after this socialist rule and socialist systems, after the fall of Berlin Wall and after the process of democratization and transition of all the system and forming the new legal and constitutional framework and adapting our system with democratic principles and democratic values, we actually consume the democracy in more harder and in more dynamic way. We consumed the democracy and democratic values, but we also knew the democratic values in the past.
Yes,
in the past system.
we had our roots
Because we have our roots before this socialist rule.
This is why I always protested against this split, that new democracies and old democracies.
No, this split is totally nonsense and totally
misleading.
Misleading, and I have an idea to put the Westerners in first line and the Easterners in second line.
Like young teenagers who should learn.
Of course, like we are kids, toddlers.
The typical narrative.
Yeah, we have to be very close to our mother, like toddlers, you know. But it is what is the essence of democracy? Is it the essence to bring back and to realize how important are the values of democracy, or is it the time framework most important thing? I think that the values, the content of democracy is the most important thing. So if we try and if we succeed to implement the major values of democracy in our countries, in our system, then time frame is not important for
and having said all this,
as a criteria.
How do you translate this into the protection aspects of human rights?
So it is very obvious that European Court of Human Rights and European, especially Council of Europe, helps us to create new constitutional and legal framework and to fight to adapt our system for better system of protection of human rights, and this is good, and this is also very positive moment for the Westerners. But now we have also our case law, and we have also our attitudes toward human rights protection. I will just explain with the one motto, which is now motto of the European Union, that is motto United in Diversity. We have this motto historically in Macedonia many years before European Community and European Union was established. We are united in diversity from Ottoman Empire, from ancient Macedonian Empire civilization, from Roman, from Byzantine civilization, because we have ancient Macedonian, Roman, Byzantine, and Ottoman roots. So we are united in diversity. Yes. In my country, there are a lot of national minorities which are living together. And we never have any problems. We never have war. We never have war in a classical sense. We were never being invaders, but we were always on the side of protecting the human rights. We have these kind of values of united in diversity in our DNA.
So they shouldn't reinvent the wheel in Macedonia from this respect.
With these values inside of our system and inside of our spirit and soul of our country, many years before a European Community and European Union
usually said that the protection of these fundamental rights is like, for us also Hungarians in Central Europe, is like air and water, so natural. We are living with these standards, and we don't need extra lecturing. The constitutional dialogue between best practices, it's another issue where those fora like the Venice Commission might be an appropriate place, and you have your own experience, and we're gonna tackle this later. But I would like to stick to my very question that could you please list some topics and areas of protection of human rights which can be considered maybe of higher importance in this region than in other parts of Europe?
Yeah.
Is there any special topic?
Yeah, because of socialist system and influence of the socialist system, we have these processes which are not tendencies of Western European countries. For example, nationalization of the property of the people. The socialists and the communists took the people private private property, and they nationalized all their private property and actually put it on a state level as a state property. And this process of restitutionalization of nationalized property is very important for the Eastern and Central European countries. This process of restitution of nationalized property is important for Macedonia also as a case. We have also we are very sensitive of this protection of family, protection of children rights, protection of religious freedom, because we are mixed. Especially these countries of Western Balkans are very mixed with a lot of religious ethnic communities, but also we have cultural traditional differences among ourselves. So we have this kind of specificities which have to be more strict in a protection and more sensitive as a political institution.
There are very tangible examples. And now narrowing down human rights protection from the Central European perspective into the Macedonian one, is there any, let's say, lessons learned from the Macedonian experience of protecting human rights? Is there any specialty in the region?
Yeah,
you already touched upon some of them. Yeah,
Westerners are nurturing and protecting their rights, and they're mostly navigated to individual rights, and they have their demos. And their individual rights are the most important points for them.
Like the community versus individuals.
Yes. And the Eastern and the Central European countries, we are more with the collective spirit. Yes. We want to cherish our collectivity. We want to cherish our state, our nation, because we are in a state building nation, you know. We especially in Western Balkan countries, we are in the state building and national building time and framework. So we have this kind of specificity regarding the protection of community rights, collective rights, and our ethnicity right, and our rights especially from the national minority point of view. We are more focused on collectivity. Westerners are more focused on individuality.
This is a very valuable comparison.
And this is, I think, our value as a Central and Eastern European countries, because we are living in a state. Nation is the base of the state. If you are not respecting your nation, and if you're not respecting the nation of others, your neighbors, then you don't respect me as a person, as an individual.
Yes. That's a very smart point of view.
If you take my soul, if you take the soul and the spirit of your country, then you take a spirit and the soul of the nation, of the individuals. Yes. So we have to come back to these values and to start to cherishing them and to start to develop them on more wiser and intellectual way and philosophical way. We lost our philosophy in every area of living. We are always running for some kind of money, more interests, more politics, but we lost our philosophy of living. And we have to come back to our philosophical roots. And we have to live with our philosophical values, because we are philosophical and mental persons who want to cherish the intellectual values of people, not the material interests of the nation.
Yes, the selfish needs.
Selfish, and in many cases, people are split. They want to be something from a material perspective, and they forgot to be a person. They forgot to be a human being. And chasing with these two situation, the split parts, actually they forgot to live in a civilization manner, in a civilization
Actually, all
way.
what you just said implies me in a further question, which might be the consequences of all of this collective perspective of human rights, or as if we in Central Europe tend to identify ourselves with as a part of a big community, and this implies also the question of responsibility. And then we are ending up with the dichotomy of rights and obligations. And I would add that I think that for us, this balance between rights and obligations, it's still some sober balance, because if I'm a member of a community, I am responsible, and responsibility means obligations towards my neighbors, towards my family, towards my fellows in the society.
And in Western countries, they forgot this responsibility. They're introvert. They look only for themselves. And that's why I'm always saying that Westerners have to help us to bring back, make together, to make this connectivity between West and East countries, to be human being first, and then politician, and
then the responsible human being first.
Yeah, and then partner. This is the main mission of the Western politician, but also of the Eastern part.
Yes, how to reconcile these,
to reconcile, and maybe to reinvent some new models of democratic conversation, democratic solidarity, and from a point of view that we have to cherish our constitutional identities, national identities. We have to build our nation through our specificities. This is analogy, very, very important analogy with the wax and candles. It is, because European Union want to see us, or you as a member country inside of European Union, as a wax. But Hungary is a very, very beautiful candle. And you cannot, it is consist of wax. It is,
but it's a homogeneous aspect. But the
candle is very beautiful.
It's yes,
colorful,
it has the national identity.
National identity. It have a spirit. It have a soul identity, and you cannot diminish, or you cannot erase all these values from your identity and becoming ordinary wax.
Tanja, if we can get to the European integration, when I first saw you presenting one of our workshops, I was really amazed about the clear vision of European Union towards which North Macedonia is now moving, and I was really amazed of the soberness and clear wording of your thoughts about this European integration. I don't think that all of the newcomers, member states who joined the EU 21 years ago had those or actually explicit thoughts about what kind of club they are about to join. So you have very clear and straightforward statements about the ever closer union concept. So first of all, how did you come to these conclusions? It was because you were a member of the Venice Commission, or because of this wide and very large international network that you actually produced or built during your career, or just your genuine instincts or the logical thinking when you are comparing and using the principles, you can come to certain conclusions. But I really loved listening to you, and this is why now comes my question: that how do you see the meaning of the ever closer union? It's having shifted over time from the formulation in the Treaty of Rome to its current invocation in political debates. How do you see this?
Yeah. Starting from 1957, Treaty of Rome, where this phrase actually was established in preamble, ever closer union concept. This was a concept which have this kind of material essence, like kind of spiritual essence and philosophical essence, what I was talking about. In that time, because the consequences of the World War II were very catastrophical for the countries. In that time, European community decided that they have to have some kind of glue which will stick all the interests of the countries and all the nations in one phrase. And this ever closer union was one phrase that fix all these nations' interests in one place. And it was meant to be a phrase which tackled the interests, the tolerance, the solidarity, the partnership, working together in one place. And it was meant to be a concept for peoples, not for nations. No, not for states. Okay. It was actually a concept of nations, of peoples, not of states. And this was the first idea of ever closer concept. And then come on the scene, the 16th and 17th, come on the scene the Court of Justice with its own principles, which was put like pillars of the legal order of European Union, and then they produced these principles of direct effect, of supremacy of EU law, and direct effect of the EU law. And then this phrase becomes some kind of phrase for political unification, because through the legal manner, political unification. And then we have Maastricht Treaty and Maastricht era, where we have this kind of political and supranational unification, and starting to talking on with one voice and one language.
Yeah, we know these
and then
slogans.
We know that what happened. We have this idea of constitutional treaty, to have one constitution codified for all member countries, but thanks God this idea was out, because of in 2005 we have voters from France and from Netherlands who say no from this constitutional referenda, and then we have cherry-picking issues with the Treaty of Lisbon, and we have Treaty of Lisbon, and we have more and more effects on supranationalization, neglecting the sovereignty of national sovereignty of member states, and we have the switch. When was the switch? Right. The switch was when the idea of Brexit come into major scene of in the European Union. Brexit actually turned the European Commission, as I recall, in 2016, they made a decision when they actually say, okay, we will cooperate with the differentiated integration. There will be a higher and a lower level of cooperation, just to stick in one European Union, just to be one European Union, not to have other Brexits on a way. And then we have this differentiated integration. What is the problem with the ever closer union now? We have actually a concept where the ever closer union is not concept for negotiation. It is a concept of negotiation and political bargaining, and it is not a concept of people interests and make them stick together with their interests and with their values.
I would like to use this sentence as a quotation in the headlines from you, because I think this is one of the most important statements in the podcast. And coming from a professor who is not actually coming from a member state, but this is amazing how aware of those internal dynamics you are.
Thank you. And this is actually, we see now that European Union is not a project which is value-based, but it is a project which is geopolitical instrument, unfortunately.
Yeah, and this is actually a fact.
Because ever closer union is put in the process of bargaining, is put in the process of political conditionality. It is misused by some politicians. It was wonderful idea from the very beginning, but what come to the end, we see totally different concept, totally different philosophical idea. The philosophy went, And now the pure interest, pure political and pragmatism and political interests are on their way. So it is up to us now, new followers, or maybe new becoming, to reform European Union inside, to come back to the real essence of the European Union, to come back to the real values such as democracy, rule of law, real human rights protection, according to the international law, according to the international treaties, not only European Union law, but also UN international law treaties, and come back to a real meaning of the words, real meaning of the rule of law. Real
Actually,
meaning of
this
the
is
democracy.
translated with the words of József Szájer, former member of the Hungarian delegation, that we have to change everything so that everything becomes as it was before.
Yes.
So, and maybe this reform might be triggered through the integration process of the Western Balkan countries, who remind the other parts and other member states of this kind of controversies and how to say misleading trends and how the ever closer union concept, as you just said, became a political tool,
pragmatic and political tool, without any essence, without any meaning, real meaning, legal and political meaning of this concept. And what makes me more angry from seeing from the professor side, seeing from the academia side, is that my colleagues, professors, are not talking about this. Because what is the aim of one professor? The aim of, and the mission of one professor is to, maybe politicians are wrong, but our mission is that we have to put them on a right path. Our mission is to be a mind of our nations, to be intellectual of our nation, to say here European Union is wrong. In this politics they are wrong. We have to come back to our roots, we have to come back to solidarity, to tolerance, we have to come back to rule of law, real essence of the rule of law, not these kind of artificially made concepts which are not good.
And how do you forecast, based on this wider horizon, what a scientific person can have and might help the policymakers, whether the EU is now moving forward or moving towards a deepening of the integration, or they might be more reasonable and they provide more flexibility for national identities, and then we will end up with a looser cooperative integration. So
my answer will be, I will say, split on several pod answers, sub answers. So what we have first, we have this unity and diversity in the European Union. Yeah, what are the key elements of the unity? We have shared values, shared principles, we have this supranational legal order, we have these supranational institutions, we have this idea of political and economical development and trading and so
practical
on. So
standards which help industry to develop.
What is good for our economy, for a single market. What diverse us? What is the elements which diverse us? Diverse us the idea of protecting of national identity. It diverse us the way we are thinking about democracy and rule of law, because we are having a different political and legal tradition. We have different political and legal
history.
Culture and history that make impression and make a new standards in their system. So what we have we have also this kind of economic and political differences. We are not the same economically and politically. We have a different level of development. We have different cultural and linguistic differences. So we are culturally different. We have 24 official languages in European Union.
Yes, 24.
24. So we are different. How to make this tension between unity and diversity more acceptable? What is the answer of this question, because we have, if I spread my ideas a lot, then I will not make
then let's focus on this very question.
Conclusion. What is the main cure to bring back this, and to not to bring back, but to settle these problems in a more accurate way, in more rational and pragmatic way? First of all, we have to decide on which level we are supranational, and we have to protect the supranational value, and from which level we have to take care of our sovereignist ideas. What is the levels of supranationalism and sovereignist idea? We have to deal with this conflict on a more rational way, because you have to put the individual member countries first. And then, because they are the master of the treaties, we have to put the emphasis on their interests first, on their sovereign rights first. And then we have to build nations which will come a Europe of the nations, Europe of different nations. In which area? Differentiated integration. In which area? We are in common. We have nothing, more or less, nothing against for climate change action. We have nothing against, for example, in digital transformation, which is a step which is move for all the peoples, for all the nations in the European Union. We are not different with maybe with the security and defense policy. We will have to see. We are not against protection of green agenda, protection of environment, protection of the air, clean waters, clean lakes, clean seas. So these are the questions. Single market.
Yes, the single market itself.
These are the questions which are not problematic, and we have to put all our effort on these items, on these issues. That issues which are problematic are related with our cultural and linguistic and traditional differences and sovereignist way of thinking in politics. So we have to put these questions in more lower level. Yes. And discuss on maybe without any political tensions, because in many situations we are thinking with a lot of emotions inside. I want to recall the statement from 2005. I think it was Angela Merkel a statement that she was. She gave this idea of making European Union as a club in clubs. Yes, and these concentric cycles. Mm-hmm. Maybe this kind of differentiated integration is already concentric circles. So we are on this mood.
This multi-speed in Europe.
In this scenario, yeah. And I think that we have to measure this very, very cautious, especially in the process of integration of other countries from Western Balkan, but also Ukraine and Moldavia. We have to check whether we are stick on rule of law and democratic values, or European Union is, as I said, geopolitical instrument. Mm-hmm. And also we have to see whether the European Union is a good player on a global world political order. Is it?
It's a far-reaching topic and question, which we don't have the time.
Where is the place of the European Union in a world order? So I think that this needs extra mind and extra ideology and spirit to think and to analyze the position of European Union in a world order, because this is the question which cannot be answered by the ordinary bureaucrats in European Union, by the ordinary elites. They are working their stuff, they're working their, but we have, as professors, as the intellectuals, we have to produce the picture of European Union, greater picture, not from today, not for 5 days ahead, for 5 years ahead, but for 50 years ahead. And this is our mission. And if we can respond to this mission, we will be happy.
As a professor, you also analyze tensions between the national constitutional courts and the Court of Justice of the European Union. Actually, when we have a tension or a different interpretation of supranational and national level, then we end up in court. This is a common sense today in Europe, and many member states are fighting for their rights in Luxembourg. Based on your analysis, what do you consider the most significant case where maybe a national constitutional court successfully asserted the national identity or the sovereignty against supranational rulings?
Definitely, it is a German constitutional court. It is first on my list. But also, other national constitutional courts have a very good case law. For example, Italian contra limite doctrine, for example, Taricco judgment, Italian Taricco judgment, for example, Spanish constitutional court also have very good contra limit with EU supremacy law and national constitutional law. Also here is a good Hungarian constitutional court, which is very good on promoting and protecting the constitutional identity. I will speak about constitutional identity because national identity is subsumed in the constitutional
yes, thank you
identity.
for the correction. Let's talk about constitutional identity.
Okay, yes. European Union law and EU treaty law says that it is a national identity, that European Union have to take care of national identity of the member states and of the candidate states, and I will come back to this moment. It is enshrined that it is a national identity in Article 4, but what is the meaning of national identity if it's not in the constitutional identity? So if we have this codified act, if it is on a higher place on the legal hierarchy of the acts, that means that this national identity is a second side of the same monad. It is the second side of the same coin. Yes, sorry, and it is actually the same story. You have the constitutional identity through the, kind of organization of power. You have this kind of republic or monarchy. You have a parliamentary, presidential, or mixed system of organization of power. You have these constitutional elements, political institutions which are separate in a legislative, executive, and a judicial manner. But national identity is something that tackles the spirit and the soul of the country and the nation. And this is very important to be inside the constitutional identity, because otherwise we will stay only with the formal aspect of the state and without essence, without material side of the state. So speaking about constitutional identity included national identity inside the constitutional identity, I will talk and I will make some points with the German Constitutional Court. As I already said, National Constitutional Court of Hungary, which is very good in protecting national identity because you have preserved in your constitution like eternal clause. You made this protection of republicanism, rule of law, democracy, parliamentarian accountability, as I think,
and the right of a nation to itself identity.
Yes, to decide about its
with
identity.
whom we would like to live with.
It's very good from speaking about the provisions of the constitution. It's very good protected. Your constitutional identity is very good protected by your constitution from the constitutional aspect. I will say a few things about the German Constitutional Court because this is my favorite. It is a Solange case law. I will not go into the details because the public don't know what is the Solange case law. But I will say most recent landmark, which was produced by the German Constitutional Court. It is a final judgment from 5th of May 2020. It is a case where I say PSPP, public sector purchase program. It is a case from the German Constitutional Court where Constitutional Court say no to the interpretation of the Court of Justice about the this program, public sector purchase program. And they said that the judges said that this case will not be implemented in Germany because this is an ultra vire judgment.
This was a very famous case.
Yes, it is very famous because in first time in the history, I will say, the German constitutional judgments say no to the interpretation of the Court of Justice and no to the previous case, Weiss, from 2018, where also the Court of Justice validate the European Central Bank bond buying program, which is under the competence of Bundestag and Bundesrat of Germany, German parliamentary competence. And it was like a continuation of this case. So the first case was Weiss in 2018, where the court, German Constitutional Court, say no, also no to this case, and said this is a violation of our constitutional identity because our parliament is a sovereign and have sovereign competence to decide on this kind of program, bond buying program. And this is actually the continuation of, in 2020, the continuation of PCPP case where they said that this is ultra vires and that the Court of Justice went far beyond the conferred competences from the European Treaty, founding treaty. So this is most...
And what was, in your views, the rationale behind this judgment? Why was the German Constitutional Court so brave? Why could they allow or afford themselves to be so brave?
I would like to...
It's a practical question.
No. I would like to finish because then the Germany went to this infringement procedure.
Yes.
Maybe you know, European Commission started this infringement procedure because the Constitutional Court was out of this EU law.
For me, it was
supremacy.
a nonsense.
And maybe if you recall, after this in 2021, I think, they negotiate with the Berlin, with politicians in Berlin, and they stop the infringement procedure, which is also very interesting for you as
because they had to do something in return, or they had to change something.
Yeah, but they didn't change anything. But I don't know what was behind the scene, political bargaining and so on. I'm not familiar, but I know that this infringement procedure was stopped by the European
But the Commission
Union.
has the discretionary power to withdraw any case.
And your question was about...
what was the underlying rationale, in your views, why Germany had to pull the brake?
Yes, because Germany is a country which really suffer a lot during the World War II and during the German occupation, and they want to cherish their democracy and their eternal clause, which is enshrined in Article 79, I think, in the basic German basic law, and also Article 23, I think. So they want to cherish this democracy and their constitutional identity. They are not saying constitutional identity, but identity of the constitution, which is the same phrase. And also their values of national identity, national dignity, that parliamentary, that the two council of parliament, two chamber of the parliament are sovereignist. And that they have to take their own responsibility and own protective mechanism to protect their country, to protect their budget, to protect the wellness of the people, the well-being of the people. So I think that this was the major intervention. Why constitutional judges decided to go further in their protectional role. And also because Court of Justice, I think in these 2 decades, last 2 decades, went too far in the process of interpretation. They become parliamentarians. They become European executive.
Yes.
They become European courts, they become European judges, they become European MPs, everything. They actually make this very fluent, this kind of separation of power. They don't have any limits where we start the legislation and where we start the executive functioning and where they start the judicial functioning. So they have, I think in Court of Justice, they have made a lot of problems with their interpretation, with the system of separation of power and also rule of law.
Unfortunately, I know them from my past experience. But
with these theological aspects, with this theological aspiration that they are teleological, they make theological interpretation. Actually, they bring more problems than cures.
Would you like to mention other precedents, or you only wanted to do the German
is
one?
Also, Polish is also good. I will mention. Thank you for make a point. Danish Supreme Court is also very good. Case from 2016. It is an IOS case, where actually again Court of Justice make them another implementation of another kind of interpretation of European employment law. And the Danish Supreme Court say no. We will not accept this kind of interpretation of the European employment law, because employment law is our national politics, and we will stick on our national conditions and our national position. And this is employment law is something which is...
This is very special for the Scandinavians and for Denmark.
That's why
I had
I'm
the experience. That is a very good example.
I mixed some
but covers all aspects.
German. Also Polish tribunal is also very good in their protection of their constitutional identity. Hungarian, as I mentioned, Czech Constitutional Court is also very, very good in this manner. But they have kind of cooperation between the Court of Justice. There are three kind of models in this relation between national constitutional courts and CGA. Yes, CGA. It is a concept of if you are cooperative and you are on a negotiable table, then you have this kind of it's not an enemy, but kind of conflict between national constitutional courts and Court of Justice, and also this kind of individualistic approach, which is I think Hungarian and Polish constitutional court is on this way, because they say we don't care about the other cases, we are caring about protection of constitutional identity of our own countries, and this is a very good position. Also, we have this preliminary ruling procedure which came from the Court of Justice, and this preliminary ruling procedure is very good channel for communication between judges, national and supranational. But it is the most important thing is whether the European judges want to listen to the national judges, because this is not a fight among them. This is a constructive dialogue. Should be on a constructive way.
Yes.
Should be more productive in resolving these conflicts and these tensions between member states and European Union institutions. And I think that the idea of the judges of the Court of Justice should be to work on major things, to work on major values, not to lose their energy in minor cases. They have to put the foundation of the European Union. They have to put the pillars of this foundation, as the house have their foundation and their pillars. They have to work on philosophical tendencies and philosophical values of these pillars and of this fundamental structure. They have to be a mind of the European Union.
That's very important statement again.
Hopefully that with these judges who are coming, new generation of judges will have this in mind, that they have to put a foundation, great foundation, that will bring us together, not foundation
tear
which
apart.
will tear us apart.
And do you think, speaking of the newcomer or the candidate countries of the West Balkan, and especially North Macedonia, are you facing greater challenges in protecting your own constitutional identity, or are you more or less vulnerable? So how you manage this tension internally?
In this stage of political and legal situation in Macedonia, I'm pessimistic about the protection of national identity in European institutions. Because we see that from European Union we have this kind of blackmailing and this kind of imposing what to do and imposing scenarios, what to do, what to think, how to manage the problems, how to resolve the conflicts and so on. So that's why I'm saying that Macedonia have to strengthen their own national institutions and to have this strength more openly and more wisely go to the European Union and say what we want actually to protect in our national identity. To realize these problems, that nobody will care more than you will care for yourself. Nobody will protect your identity in the best way that your institution can.
So you should take your own fate in your own hands.
Of course, but this is very
for yourself.
Yes, this is very difficult position of my country, because we are a small landlocked country which is in the heart of the Balkan Peninsula. It has a very geostrategically very good position in Europe, but still we are very with law resources, with law and academic resources also. So we have to find cooperative partners, friends from outside, especially from the Central and Eastern European countries, which might help us in this way of defending our national identity in this process of European Union integration. Because if we lost our national identity, that means that we will lost everything. We will lost our spirit, our soul, and our material essence. But
they are under challenge.
We are under challenge. We were under challenge from very beginning of our independent and sovereign country. When we started this independence story from 1991, Previously, we was part of Yugoslavia Federation, but then we started to build our nation and to build our republic, because we were one of those 6 republics and 2 regions in Yugoslavia Federation. We start this process of national building and state building into Yugoslavia Federation, and then we know why, because Yugoslavia was dissoluted, and because of this process of dissolution, Macedonia decided to go in their individual path and to become independent country. So starting from 1991, we have these problems from the very, very beginning, first from the Greece side and now from the Bulgarian side. And I will say that the Macedonian case is precedent case in Europe, and maybe in worldwide, maybe in the world.
So you can elaborate on that.
We are a precedent case because
why?
In first year of our independence, Greeks say no, they have to change their name because our region is Macedonia, their state Macedonia, and this might produce many conflicts between neighboring countries. Mm-hmm. But I want to assure you that until 1988, nobody in Greece were talking about Macedonia. Nobody. Starting when we became independent country, this story was turned on, and I have to make clear marks because many things are now going into my mind. So I want to be clear. They have their Macedonian region. But this is something different. Macedonian region is something different than Macedonian state. We have this republic in front of our name, yes. Republic of Macedonia. So we were divided from as a state and as a region. Mm-hmm. And this was clear. But somebody from Greek authorities said, no, you have to change your name. Okay. And we were pressing that we will not be recognized by the United Nations, that we will not be recognized as a officially recognized country. And they put this reference former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, meant to be only for 2 months. Reference for only 2 months usage, but it lasts for 15 years.
When did this happen, this change, exactly?
In 1995.
1995.
Yes, and starting from that period, we have one judgment from International Court of Justice, where the judges said that Greece in many cases have made a problem with the implementation of interim accord. It was interim accord was the accord which bring back the position into the table, and we find this kind of compromise formula in reference for our country as name of our country, so former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. And the Court of Justice always refers to the resolutions of the UN resolutions and said that Greece in many cases breaches the interim accord, and that they have no right to do that. Mm-hmm. I'm going to with simple words because many people are not familiar with our case, with our legal language. So that's why I want to make simple. And sorry if I make any many mistakes in my language, but I want to try to put it in the simplest way as possible. So this interim accord went. You know that we have also embargo from the Greek side, economic embargo, which was reflected in our economic also situation. We were out of gas, out of oil, out of anything, and then we have suddenly we were like. I said, you will be awarded with a situation that we will become after these changes of the name, former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, you will be awarded to be a member of the NATO. Mm-hmm. And in that famous situation in conference, in NATO conference, the Greek partner said no. You will not enter into NATO alliance because you have to change your name again, and you have to change your culture, your national identity, and you have to be more enthusiastic in this way, in this direction. So we have this PRESPA agreement. I've skipped all the details, and we have 2018 when we have this PRESPA agreement, which was imposed agreement from other countries, which was imposed and enshrined in our constitution without the direct popular legitimacy. We have what Carl Schmitt said, we have constituent power, but we don't have constituent power. Mm-hmm. Carl Schmitt made this differentiation between constituent power is the power of political institutions. They might go on the other side from the sovereignty, people's will. Mm-hmm. They can decide it politically on a totally different way that the people want. Mm-hmm. But you have to take care about the equilibria, the essence of the dialogue between the constituent power and constituent power. Mm-hmm. And constituent power are the Macedonians, the people who are living in Macedonia. And they've been asked to give the legitimacy of PRESPA agreement in a consultative referendum.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which is not binding.
Which is not obliged, not binding. And plus, it was not successful referendum because many people were not part of this, and the census was not completed.
But it was declared then final.
And they declared that the Macedonian people say yes. to this agreement of Prespa, and they try to, it was many political also scenarios regarding the illegal wiretape conversation was going on. They were publicly revealed.
And what happens now?
MPs were in the jail. Although they have immunity, they have their own mandate, they were in jail. They make a pressure under their members of the families. And they changed the constitution, they changed the name North Macedonia, although they didn't ask for the people, the sovereign people, what is their decision about this issue. And it was very, this referendum question was unique. Mm-hmm. We have 10 sub-questions in one question, and which is out of logic and out of legal position regarding the referendum.
And what is the current challenge?
Because the current challenge is national identity. We have also the other agreement with Bulgaria. It was meant to be a friendship treaty, but somehow this treaty went on a very wrong direction. By the French proposal, this treaty was directed on a very, very bad way, because we have strong memory that when we declared the independence, actually Bulgarian people and Bulgarian political authorities say yes for the state, no for the nation. And we remember, and I recall that I was not so young, I was a student that days, but I know that they always say yes for the state. Yeah, you can have your state, but your nation is under the problematic observation from our historic people who are, working on historical matter, especially historical academia and so on. So they want to try to push our effort now to make this asymmetric political pressure, because this is not normal. We are still in a waiting room, waiting for some kind of sticks, some kind of carrot maybe, but nothing happened. And we are on a waiting room more than 15 years. So we are trying to open our accession negotiations. But this opening the accession negotiation is connected with the resolving the issues with Bulgaria. And the issues with Bulgaria is that we have to put the Bulgarian national minority into our preamble of the constitution. And this is not the end of the story. We have from the other side 14 judgments from the European Court of Human Rights, which are final and which are not implemented in Bulgarian legal system. We have 14 judgments from the Court of Human Rights, which said that Macedonian people, the national minority in Bulgaria, have a right for free expression of the freedom of association and freedom of their organization, to be a part of this society. But the Bulgarian authority says that this kind of recognition of freedom of association and organization of the Macedonian national minority is a big national threat for their national positions.
So it seems like trade-offs on constitutional identity are inevitable in this integration process. So what is
nobody can protect us from this kind of bargaining and this kind of political games, and we are left alone. But we have to be more courage. We have to take more courage in ourselves and fighting with arguments, with legal arguments, and maybe this position to use this position of German National Constitutional Court, and to start with ultra vires conditionality and ultra vires protection. Otherwise, and constitutional identity protection. Otherwise, we will be like a melting pot, like put it in a melting pot and nothing. We will in a very short time we will have nothing to protect, because everything will be under the problematized and under the fire.
I hope that researchers like you can have a valuable contribution here for.
I hope that the Constitutional Court will listen to my arguments and my findings, and that they can save the national identity through ultravirus.
We should soon come to the closure of this discussion, but the very last topic is your membership, formal membership in the Venice Commission, and please just shortly tell us about your experience and what is the precedent or opinion. What are you the most proud of?
Venice Commission. When I first went there, I was full with optimism, full with strength that I will go there, energetically go there and make many changes in the way of they are looking the things, and like we are talking about many things that we're looking on not good dynamic and good direction. So actually I was very with high energy and go there to bring some new level of knowledge and experience. But what I saw there was that the Venice Commission is a purely political entity and expert body with much political influence from the national states and European Union members than somebody can imagine.
Did they take into consideration with the appropriate weight your positions, or did they respect your position?
No,
coming
they
from
actually
Macedonia?
They didn't say hello to me on the first session when I was
How many
coming.
Person is sitting in a session?
From 47 countries. So they have also observers, 50 countries. So this is official remark that every new person which will come as a new person, as a new member,
should be greeted.
Should be, And they didn't. Okay, I said maybe this is some kind of
accident.
Some kind of maybe new politics and maybe some kind of new, I don't know, way of thinking and way of seeing things. But nevertheless, I was curious to make some changes, and I was I supposed to make some kind of changes into the statute of the Venice Commission, because I see that if this body is a body of democracy through rule of law, then we have to cherish our constitutional pluralism. And if we have to cherish our constitutional pluralism, that means that we have to respect each other, to respect our constitutional system, our constitutional acts, our bylaws, laws, and everything is going into the system and in the system. So we have to cherish our plurality. And if this is the case, that the plurality is the main ingredient of democracy, that means that we have to respect our different opinions, different positions on wider questions, And that's why I said, okay, we are a commission for democracy through law. Let's start implement this phrase, this motto inside our acts. And they were like, okay, what do you mean by that? I said, let put the initiative, which will be signed by me and other members, to make changes into the statute of the Venice Commission to be a real commission with real plurality and diversity of opinion. And let's introduce the separate opinion, from the different members who will have different approach to some questions. And they started this initiative. It was an initiative which was started by me, but also signed by 5 other members, so we were 6 altogether. And they must put it on a plenary session. We went in the plenary session, but it was without success. But still, we have this initiative on a paper. And it was one big challenge in front of the other members who were silent about this initiative. And it was a wonderful opportunity to bring a real democracy into the work of the Venice Commission. Because separate opinions can move the things from the muddle into the clear water of the Venice Commission work. I don't want to make too many critics in the work of Venice Commission. There are sometimes good opinions, but I think that they misuse and misunderstood my initiative, which was very, very creative and a new way of thinking into the system. They say that the Venice Commission is not a court, because I was making some parallels with the courts. Constitutional courts have their own separate opinions, but they say, no, we are not a court, we are a commission which have to bring together the democracy and rule of law in the countries. Okay, I said, the anonymity is not a democratic tool. Anonymity is something that you have to be on that side, although you will not be a part of the Venice Commission work. You have to be on the line with all 48, 47 members. While if you make any difference and different thinking, you're out of the game. And this is really a shame.
I'm certain that if in North Macedonia there are teachers like you, I'm sure that there might be followers of this attitude in the Venice Commission in the future. So I'm quite positive and hopeful. We have to really close our discussion for time constraints. But my final question is regarding our cooperation in the Central European Academy, which is a very fruitful cooperation. But our challenge is also to provide the sustainability of this network. So, would you, and if yes, why would you recommend for your students to come to work with us?
Yes.
What would you tell them? What is the added value regarding others?
Yeah, I'm recent professor. I came in 2023 in academia.
A bit earlier, like in 23, you might have some cooperation.
Yeah, with the lectures.
Yeah, but with lectures.
Yeah,
yes.
but I am already have 12 students from Macedonia, and these are my students. Okay. So in last year they finished three of them. They finished their Master of Human Rights and Rule of Law. Excellent students. Now we have 2 PhD students from also Macedonia, and also they are excellent, perfect students.
I know them because I hold workshops.
Yes, they say also that they are familiar with your work, and that you make a close cooperation with them. And thank you very much for your effort, because they are really good students, and they will make
they're excellent
students.
A very good quality English language.
Yes, very good quality English, and also very good setting in mind. You know, they have a very good inspirational thoughts about how to manage to create a more democratic and more valuable not only science space but also legal space in Macedonia. And this is really good challenges for them, and also for Macedonia to call them later when they finish the doctoral dissertations, to call them and to be a part of our institution, and to help Macedonia in a more positive way, in more I will say advanced level way. And also I have have a new generation coming from Macedonia in Master of Human Rights and Rule of Law, 5 of them, and 2 in Children's Rights. So I have 12 students. So this is really a big compliment for the Central European Academy that so many Macedonians for a very short time came in Central European Academy and will be a product of Central European Academy at the end. And really, I think that this academy is a really good place. It is a good, excellent platform for exchanging not only students but also professors. Research professors network is really very good tool that we have, and we have to use this tool more often in implementing in application of the projects, working on European projects, and also working on projects which are coming from Council of Europe and other places, and also from American funds, why not? And to bring this, first of all, to bring this friendship.
Yes, so the relationship between human beings.
This is very important for rest of the things, because if you have friendship, good base foundation, then you will have positive and good products after.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Tanja Karakamisheva Jovanovska, for being with us. Dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to us. Please follow us on the social platforms, and we are continuing with the next episode of the Central European Legal Insights. Thank you very much, Tanja.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Central European Legal Insights. Don't forget to follow us on our social media channels for updates. To discover more conversations from the series, be sure to explore our other episodes. Thank you for listening.